We paid your medical bills for years. Sign the house over and stop being selfish. My daughter-in-law said across the dinner table. My son lowered his eyes and slowly nodded. I folded my napkin carefully, stood up without a word, and walked upstairs to the bedroom I used to share with my husband. The next morning, I went to the bank. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The dining room still smelled faintly of roasted chicken and rosemary long after dinner ended. The chandelier above the table cast a soft yellow light over the plates no one had bothered to clear. My husband Harold had installed that chandelier himself nearly 20 years ago, standing on an old ladder while I held my breath beneath him. Now the house felt colder than it ever had before. It had only been 12 days since we buried Harold. 12 days since I stood beside his casket at St. Matthew's Church, listening to people tell me what a wonderful man he had been. They were right. Harold had been patient, careful, and endlessly protective of me, especially when it came to money. Mom, you have to understand, my son Daniel finally said from downstairs, his voice carrying through the quiet house. The hospital bills nearly ruined us. I closed my eyes slowly. That didn't make sense. Harold had always handled our insurance personally. Every policy, every payment, every account. And yet tonight, my daughter-in-law Karen spoke as though I owed them my home in exchange for survival. As I sat alone on the edge of my bed, staring at Harold's reading glasses still resting on the nightstand, a thought quietly settled into my mind. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth. The house sounded different after Harold died. Every room carried a strange kind of silence, the kind that made small noises feel too loud. The ticking clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, even the creaking wooden stairs seemed sharper now. I woke up early the next morning, though I barely slept at all. Harold's side of the bed remained untouched. His navy robes still hung behind the bathroom door, and his slippers were neatly placed beside the dresser exactly where he had left them the night before his heart attack. For 41 years, we shared this house together. Now I felt like a guest inside my own life. Downstairs, I found Karen already sitting in the kitchen scrolling through her phone with a cup of coffee in her hand. She barely looked up when I entered. "There's oatmeal if you want some," she said flatly. Not, "Good morning." Not, "How are you holding up?" Just oatmeal. Daniel came in a few minutes later wearing his work jacket, avoiding my eyes the same way he had during dinner the night before. My son used to hug me every morning when he visited. Harold used to joke that Daniel never stopped being a little boy around his mother. But Karen had changed the atmosphere in this house slowly over the years. Quietly, carefully. Karen found a realtor, Daniel said while pouring coffee, just to see what the house might be worth. I froze with my spoon halfway to my mouth. A realtor. They were already planning my future without me. I thought we were only talking about medical debt, I said softly. Karen finally looked at me then. "Linda, we're trying to save everyone from financial disaster." Something about the way she said it made a cold feeling settle deep in my stomach. Because Harold never left disasters behind. Over the next few days, little things around the house started changing. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Grief can make ordinary things feel strange. Harold used to say that sorrow plays tricks on the mind. But this felt different. One afternoon, I opened the hallway closet and noticed several of my winter coats were gone. Karen said she had donated them because they were taking up space. Another morning, I discovered the filing cabinet in Harold's office locked. The small brass key that always sat inside his desk drawer had disappeared. Daniel moved some important paperwork, Karen explained casually while wiping down the kitchen counter. "There are financial issues we need to organize." Financial issues. She repeated those words constantly now. At dinner, They spoke in half sentences whenever I entered the room. Their voices lowered. Conversations stopped. Karen's laptop snapped shut whenever I walked past the dining room table. Then came the phone calls. Twice that week, someone claiming to be from a medical collections office called the house asking for Harold's estate. Karen always answered before I could reach the phone. "I'm handling it," she told me firmly afterward. "You don't need the stress." But stress had already settled into every corner of this home. Late Friday afternoon, I walked into the garage looking for an old box of Christmas decorations. Instead, I found Daniel standing beside Harold's tool bench speaking quietly with a man in a grey suit. A realtor. The man held a clipboard while studying the walls and windows. Daniel looked startled when he saw me. "Mom, we were just discussing options," he said quickly. Options. That word stayed with me all night. Because nobody discusses selling a house unless they already believe it belongs to them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom windows while I lay staring at the ceiling beside the empty space where Harold used to sleep. For years, whenever life became difficult, he would reach for my hand in the dark and say, "We'll handle it together, Linda." Now I was alone with questions I didn't know how to answer. Around midnight, I finally got out of bed and opened the cedar chest at the foot of our room. Inside were old photo albums, greeting cards, and stacks of papers Harold refused to throw away. At the very bottom, tucked beneath an envelope of faded vacation photos, I found a letter in Harold's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just folded neatly. "Linda, if you're reading this, something has probably gone wrong." My hands trembled slightly as I continued. "You know I never trusted debt. I made sure this family would always be protected, no matter what anyone says after I'm gone. You are never to give up this house without speaking to Mr. Bennett first." Mr. Bennett. Harold's attorney. I hadn't heard that name in years. The letter continued. "There are things I handled quietly because I never wanted you to worry. Promise me you won't sign anything under pressure." I sat there for a long time holding the paper in my lap. Suddenly, memories began replaying differently in my mind. Karen insisting on handling the mail. Daniel avoiding eye contact whenever finances came up. The missing key to Harold's filing cabinet. And the realtor standing in my garage like he already belonged there. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. For the first time since Harold died, grief was no longer the only thing I felt. Now I felt suspicion. The next morning, I waited until Daniel and Karen left the house before I opened Harold's old desk again. The missing key was still gone. For a moment, I simply stood there staring at the locked drawer, remembering how many evenings Harold spent sitting behind that desk balancing checkbooks and organizing paperwork. He used to joke that paperwork was his version of gardening. Quiet, careful, predictable. Harold hated financial chaos. Which was exactly why none of this made sense. I slipped his letter into my purse, put on my beige wool coat, and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. The November wind cut through my gloves as cars rushed past on the wet streets. By the time I reached First Federal Bank downtown, my hands were shaking. Partly from the cold, partly from fear. The young teller directed me to a private office where a branch manager named Susan greeted me kindly after hearing Harold's name. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Walker," she said softly. I nodded and placed Harold's letter carefully on her desk. "I need to understand our financial situation," I told her. "My son says we're drowning in medical debt." Susan frowned slightly as she typed into her computer. The room grew quiet except for the clicking of keys. Then her expression changed. Confusion first, then surprise. "Mrs. Walker," she said slowly, turning the screen toward herself again as if checking twice. "According to these records, Your home has been fully paid off for almost 11 years. I stared at her without speaking. That can't be right, I whispered. My daughter-in-law said the hospital bills nearly bankrupted us. Susan looked back at the screen carefully. There are no liens against the property, she said, and I'm not seeing any outstanding medical collections connected to your accounts either. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Because someone in my family was lying to me. Susan continued scrolling through the records while I sat frozen in the leather chair across from her desk. There's actually something else here, she said carefully. A trust account connected to your husband. My heart tightened. Harold had never mentioned a trust. He opened it about 8 years ago, Susan explained, and according to these documents, you are the primary beneficiary. She printed several pages and slid them gently across the desk toward me. The numbers blurred for a moment before my eyes finally adjusted. The account held far more money than I expected. Enough to cover every hospital bill Harold could have possibly owed. Enough to keep me comfortable for years. I looked up slowly. Then why would Daniel say they've been paying my expenses? Susan hesitated politely. Mrs. Walker, from what I can see, your monthly medical insurance payments were automatically withdrawn directly from this trust account. A strange numbness settled over me. Karen's voice echoed in my mind again. We paid your medical bills for years. Sign the house over. Stop being selfish. But they hadn't paid anything. Not with their money. Susan lowered her voice slightly. There's also a note attached to the trust file from your husband's attorney. It says any transfer involving the property requires your direct written authorization witnessed by legal counsel. Harold. Even after death, he was still trying to protect me. Outside the bank windows, the sky had turned grey with heavy clouds. People hurried along the sidewalks carrying umbrellas while I sat there realizing something painful. My son hadn't come into this house after Harold died to help me grieve. He came looking for control. And Karen. Karen already believed the house belonged to them. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back inside my purse. Then I thanked Susan, stood up quietly, and walked toward the exit. For the first time in weeks, I was no longer confused. Now I was paying attention. When I returned home that afternoon, Karen was standing in the kitchen flipping through a stack of mail. The moment she saw me, she quickly turned one envelope face down against the counter. A week ago, I might not have noticed. Now I noticed everything. How was your day? She asked casually. I removed my coat slowly. Quiet. Her eyes studied my face for a second too long. Daniel arrived home shortly after sunset looking exhausted. He loosened his tie, kissed Karen on the cheek, and immediately asked, "Did the collections office call again?" Collections office. The words almost sounded rehearsed now. Karen sighed dramatically. Not yet. But we need to handle this before things get worse. I watched them from across the dinner table while steam rose from the pot roast Karen had made. Harold used to love pot roast on Sundays. He always covered his plate in black pepper and teased me for using too many carrots. Tonight, nobody mentioned him. Mom, Daniel finally said carefully. Karen and I spoke to someone about restructuring the property. Restructuring. Another soft word hiding something ugly underneath. You mean selling my house? I replied quietly. Karen immediately jumped in. Linda, please stop making this emotional. We're trying to protect you. Protect me. The same woman who donated my coats without asking. The same woman hiding mail. The same woman trying to rush me into signing papers before I even understood what was happening. Daniel slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside were transfer documents. My name was already typed neatly across the signature lines. We can meet with the realtor tomorrow, Karen said. If you cooperate now, we can avoid court complications later. Court. That word landed heavily in the room. But instead of panic, I felt something else. Calm. Because for the first time, I knew something they didn't. Harold had prepared for this long before any of us realized why. I picked up the folder slowly and flipped through the papers one page at a time. Karen watched me carefully from across the table. Daniel kept rubbing his hands together the way he always did when he was nervous. He used to do that as a little boy before piano recitals. Now he did it while trying to take his mother's house. "These documents need to be signed tonight," Karen said. "The market is shifting, and we can't delay." I looked down at the paperwork again. Transfer of ownership. Property authorization. Temporary financial control. The language was polite, professional. But underneath it all, the message was simple. Give us everything. I closed the folder gently. "I'd like my attorney to review this first," I said calmly. The silence that followed was immediate. Karen's expression tightened so quickly she couldn't hide it. "Attorney," she repeated. "Linda, lawyers cost money we don't have." Interesting. An hour earlier, they were discussing realtors and court filings. Now suddenly they couldn't afford legal advice. Daniel leaned forward. "Mom, we're only trying to help you avoid losing the house." I held his gaze for the first time in days. "The house isn't being lost," I said quietly. Karen laughed once under her breath. "You don't understand how serious this situation is." But I was beginning to understand perfectly. Harold had left safeguards, which meant he expected someone might pressure me after he was gone. That realization sat heavily in my chest. Karen suddenly stood and gathered the plates from the table with sharp, angry movements. "Fine," she muttered, "but don't blame us later when everything falls apart." I said nothing. That night, after they went upstairs, I quietly called the number written at the bottom of Harold's letter. Mr. Bennett answered on the second ring. And after hearing my name, he went completely silent for several seconds. Then he said softly, "Mrs. Walker, I've been wondering how long it would take before they tried." The next morning, I met Mr. Bennett in a small brick office just 3 blocks from the courthouse downtown. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner, too. But the moment he shook my hand, I saw the same careful expression Harold trusted for nearly 30 years. After I explained everything, Mr. Bennett removed his glasses slowly and leaned back in his chair. "I was afraid this might happen," he said quietly. He opened a thick folder from his desk drawer and turned several pages toward me. Inside were copies of Harold's trust documents, property protections, and financial instructions. Then I saw Daniel's name. Dozens of withdrawal records. My stomach tightened. "Your husband allowed limited access to the trust several years ago," Mr. Bennett explained, "mostly to help Daniel during business difficulties." Business difficulties. Harold once mentioned helping Daniel after a failed investment, but I never knew how much money had been involved. He withdrew over $200,000 across 5 years. Mr. Bennett continued carefully. "Your medical expenses were never paid by Daniel or Karen. They came directly from the trust." I stared at the papers silently. Every guilt-filled speech, every mention of sacrifice, every accusation about being selfish. All lies. "There's more," Mr. Bennett said. He slid one final document across the desk. A legal protection clause signed by Harold. Any attempt to pressure, manipulate, or deceive Linda Walker into surrendering property rights would immediately remove the offending party from future inheritance distributions. My hands tightened around the paper. Harold knew. Somehow, long before I did, Harold saw exactly what Daniel and Karen might become after he was gone. Mr. Bennett folded his hands carefully. "Mrs. Walker, legally speaking, they've already crossed a very dangerous line." Outside the office window, I watched people hurrying through the cold afternoon streets. Meanwhile, in my own home, my son and his wife still believed I knew nothing. When I arrived home that evening, the dining room table was already covered with paperwork again. Karen looked up immediately. "Perfect timing," she said. "The realtor can come tomorrow morning if we finalize everything tonight." I removed my gloves slowly and placed my purse beside the staircase. Daniel stood near the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed, restless and impatient. He looked so much like Harold around the eyes that for one painful second, my heart almost softened. Almost. "We're running out of time, Mom," he said. "The debt situation is getting worse." I looked directly at him. "What debt?" The room went still. Karen recovered first. "Linda, we already explained this." "No," I said calmly. "You explained a story." Daniel's face tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my purse and removed several folded documents from Mr. Bennett's office. Bank statements, trust records, property filings. Karen's expression changed the moment she saw the papers. Slowly, carefully, I placed them across the table. "The house has been fully paid off for 11 years," I said quietly. "My medical expenses were covered through Harold's trust account." Nobody spoke. I continued. "And according to these records, Daniel withdrew more than $200,000 from that trust long before Harold died." Daniel went pale. Karen immediately stepped forward. "That money was for family expenses." "Was it?" I asked softly. The silence after that felt heavier than shouting. For the first time since Harold's funeral, Daniel couldn't look me in the eyes. Karen tried again. "Linda, you're misunderstanding." "No," I interrupted gently. "I finally understand perfectly." Then I pulled out the final document. Harold's protection clause. And suddenly, neither of them looked confident anymore. Karen grabbed the document first. Her eyes moved quickly across the page while Daniel stood frozen beside the table. I watched the color slowly disappear from both their faces. "This is ridiculous," Karen snapped suddenly. "You went behind our backs to some lawyer." "Our backs," I repeated quietly. The words sounded strange now, as though I were the outsider in the house Harold and I built together. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "Mom, we were trying to help." I looked at my son for a long moment. I remembered holding his hand on his first day of kindergarten because he was too scared to walk inside alone. I remembered working double shifts at the diner after Harold's construction business struggled in the early years. I remembered paying for Daniel's college textbooks when we barely had enough money for groceries. And now he stood in front of me pretending theft was kindness. "The trust records say otherwise," I said softly. Karen slammed the papers down onto the table. "Fine. So what now? You're going to punish your own family?" Family. Interesting how people use that word only after getting caught. I reached for my purse calmly and removed one final envelope from Mr. Bennett. Inside was an official legal notice. Effective immediately. All future access to Harold's trust had been suspended pending formal review. Daniel stared at the page in disbelief. "You froze the accounts?" "No," I answered quietly. "Harold did." The silence after that felt enormous. Karen stepped backward like the floor had shifted beneath her. For the first time since this began, I saw fear in her eyes. Not grief. Not guilt. Fear. Because the house, the money, and the future they thought already belonged to them had suddenly slipped out of reach. And deep down, they both knew why. Daniel and Karen moved out 3 weeks later. Not because I forced them to. Because once the trust accounts were frozen and the property transfer failed, the atmosphere inside the house changed completely. The confidence Karen carried for weeks disappeared almost overnight. The whispered conversations stopped. The pressure stopped. And one quiet Saturday morning, I watched them load boxes into the back of a rental truck without saying much at all. Daniel paused at the front door before leaving. For a moment, he looked like my son again, not the tired, anxious man standing beside a woman who taught him to see his mother as an obstacle. "Mom," he started softly. But whatever apology he planned to say never fully came out. I simply nodded once. Then he walked away. The house became quiet after that. Not the cold silence that followed Harold's death. A different kind of quiet. Peaceful. A few days later, I finally unlocked Harold's old filing cabinet with the spare key Mr. Bennett found in his office records. Inside were neatly organized folders, insurance papers, family photographs, and one final handwritten note resting on top. "Linda, if you're reading this, it means you stood your ground. I knew you would." I sat there holding the note while afternoon sunlight poured through the office window. 41 years with Harold, and somehow he still found ways to protect me even after he was gone. That spring, I planted roses along the front walkway again. The same white roses Harold planted the year Daniel graduated high school. Neighbors began stopping by more often. I started attending church regularly again. Little by little, life returned to the house. Sometimes losing people doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it happens slowly, one compromise at a time. And sometimes the greatest act of love is finally refusing to disappear inside your own family.